Hi guys, Freddy here, and you'll pardon my voice being a bit deeper. It's because I'm loaded with a cold this week. My son brought it in last weekend, and now the entire household has it. So I'm a bit husky. But anyway, welcome back to the desktop for another rules breakdown. And this week I would like to cover Marc Miller's Traveller. This uses the standard Traveller rules, so it's going to bear a lot of resemblance to the MegaTraveller rules I covered a few months back. But there are some slight differences, so I'd like to go over them. Now, Marc Miller's Traveller was only the current version of Traveller for a whole 2 years, from 1996 to 1998, when GURPS Traveller became the current version, and then there were later versions from 2002 onwards, and I believe there's still versions out today. But after Traveller New Era had ended with the downfall of Games Designers Workshop when they'd gone out of business, the license reverted to Marc Miller, and he brought out this version. But as I said, it only lasted for 2 years. So Marc Miller's Traveller uses a task system, which involves adding the rating of your attribute to a rating of a skill, and then rolling a certain amount of dice under that skill. So let's have a look at the attributes and skills first of all. So we've got a sample character here on page 25. And we can see that the attributes are here as the UPP. So we've got 879C9A, which looks like an ID code, but that's actually his attributes. So it's strength, dexterity, endurance, intelligence, education, social standing. So character here has a C intelligence. That's in hexadecimal. So that is A is 10, B is 11, C is 12. So he has an intelligence of 12. And he has an A for social standing, so that's a 10. Basically, attributes are up to 15, so it's a hexadecimal rating. Let's say he was attempting to hack into a computer. So he has a computer skill of 1, and we'll be using his intelligence of 12, so he has 13. So now we need to roll under 13. As you can see, for a lower attribute, the target number would be much lower, so you'd be more likely to roll over it and fail. But if we turn on to page 49, we can see tasks have target numbers, or tasks have dice codes. Easy tasks, average tasks, difficult tasks, formidable, staggering, and impossible. And over the page, it details what that means. So an easy task is 1 dice, generally considered to be an automatic success. Average is 2 dice, difficulty is 2.5 dice. Now, you're rolling 3 dice, but the third dice is just getting halved, rounding up. So if you roll 6, it gets halved down to 3, but if you roll a 5, it gets rounded down to 2.5, but up to 3. Difficult tasks, formidable are 3 dice, staggering are 3.5, impossible are 4 dice. And we've got level 0 skills. So something which you absolutely need to have a skill for. So you're trying to disarm a nuclear missile or whatever. You're not using a skill, but you're using the attribute, and it's 1.5 dice for that. Now, you can add targets numbers together if something's spectacularly difficult, if there's different reasons. But let's say he's just trying to hack into a computer and it's difficult. So it's 2.5 dice. And he's got 13. So we roll the dice. Now, we've got 8 to there. We've got a 3. So that's rounded down to 2. So he's got a 10 total. So that's under his 13, and he succeeds. And skills are quite simple like that. You're finding out the difficulty of the task and rolling a certain amount of dice based on that. And you're trying to get under your attribute plus your skill to succeed. Initiative in 4th edition's done a little oddly, because there are 3 initiative systems. If we turn over to page 52, we can see there's group initiative by size. So basically the smaller group goes first, because it's easier for them to coordinate against a larger force. They can be more responsive. Or we have group initiative by roll. So the leader of each group rolls a d6, adds their leadership, and then they go then. So whichever side rolls highest plus leadership. If you don't have leadership, it's just the roll of the dice. And individual initiative in which case every person rolls d6, adds their leadership, and goes in that sequence. But basically, your leadership skill is your initiative attribute. If you don't have that, you're just rolling a d6 by itself instead of rolling the d6 and adding your leadership. Now, combat is just a skill roll as usual. If we flick over onto page 55 here, we can see hand-to-hand combat is an average test of 2D of brawling skill. So going back to our character, he's got a brawling skill of 2, he's got strength of 8, so he's rolling against a 10. He rolls, he gets a 4, he hits. It's as simple as that. For ranged combat, though, it becomes a bit different. Because if we flick onto the weapons on page 80, we can see every weapon has a range. Now, the ranges have various effects, because instead of it being how far the gun shoots, this is actually a bonus to hit based on its range. So if I have a look at a standard pistol, it has a very short range, whereas a bullpup rifle has a short range. Let's have a look at a different one, a medium range. That's better. Now, if we go back to page 61 to have a look at the effects of the ranges, we've got a combat chart here, and we can see the range number. So very short adds 1 dice, or adds a bonus of 1 to your skill, sorry. So you're rolling your 2 dice to hit somebody, but you're getting a +1 to hit with very short range. Now, depending on the range that you're actually at, is the difficulty. So if something's at contact range, it's easy, so you're rolling 1 dice. For very short range, you're rolling 2 dice, but you're adding 1 to your roll for a very short ranged weapon. But if we go up to medium, it's adding 3 for a very short range, and only rolling the 2 dice, the same as the average difficulty. It's only when you're getting up to medium range and it's formidable, so we're rolling more dice, rolling 3 or 3.5. It actually says there, so formidable's 3 dice. But we're still adding 3 for the medium range of the rifle. So you get a bonus to hit based on the range capability of your gun. So longer range weapons actually hit targets better at short range than short range weapons. It just seems a bit of an oddity, but it kind of does make some sense. So that's what you're doing. You're rolling your number of dice against the target number of the range, adding a bonus based on the range of your weapon. When you hit a target, your damage is based on the weapon you're using. So if we go back to page 80, we can see each weapon has it. So the pistol we were looking at actually has a damage of 5. And the rifle we were looking at actually only has a damage of 4. Now that's how many dice damage it's rolling. But people get armor as well. So if we flick back a couple of pages to the armor, we can see Diplo armor here actually does protection of flexible armor rating of 3. Now flexible armor means that out of the 4 dice for the rifle, for example, 3 of those are automatically considered 1s. But we're still rolling 1 dice for damage. Now, for the 5 dice, you'd be getting 3 1s and that. For battle dress, however, it provides a rigid armor of 5 to the arms and legs. So all 5 dice, even for the pistol, would be removed, basically making people in battle dress immune to pistols. Now, assuming the damage gets through, let's take it as the 1 dice plus the 3 1s against flexible armor. So we roll our 1 dice, and we have 3 plus 3 1s. So we've got a 3 and 3 1s there. Now if we turn back to page 57, we can see resolving wounds, and it explains here how they work. But basically you are taking each dice separately off an attribute and off the physical attributes. So off the strength, dexterity, and endurance. So we can allocate all of those dice to strength and lose 6 points off that, so his strength will be reduced to only 2. Or we can take them off separately, so he loses 4 off his strength and 1 off each of his dexterity and endurance, whichever way we want. We can split them up. However, each whole dice has to be taken off 1 attribute, where it's not 6 points which you can decide to split around. Each dice must be taken separately. So that's how you take damage. The points come off your attributes, and when any attribute is reduced to 0, you drop unconscious. So splitting them around nicely is probably the best way of doing it, just in case you get 6 and you have to suddenly take it off 1 attribute. So you probably want to drain your high attributes first, but it's up to the player how they handle it. But if one single attribute drops below 0, they go down. So perhaps you might want to leave your stamina intact, so if you do take a large amount of damage, you could just apply it to that and still stay on your feet fighting. Completely up to the player though. Now, healing up is dealt with recovering from wounds, page 57-58. Superficial wounds, so if you've suffered damage but you've had no characteristics reduced to 0, is considered to suffer superficial wounds. An easy test of first aid or medical skill, assuming a first aid is available, is sufficient to clean and bind the wounds, prevent infection. Character then recovers all of his points over the course of 1 day. Minor wounds, if you suffered sufficient damage to reduce 1 characteristic to 0, you're considered to have taken minor wounds. An average test of first aid and medical skill, you will recover 2 points per characteristic per day. Serious wounds are requiring of a medical facility and a formidable test of the medical skill. With successful care, the wounded character recovers 1 point to 1 characteristic each day. Without it, healing is not possible. And we've got death. Characters who have suffered sufficient damage to reduce all 3 characteristics to 0 have been killed. However, assuming the brain is not destroyed, it can survive without damage for roughly 5 minutes after the heart has been stopped. If the referee allows, the character may be saved if he is placed in a low passage berth within 5 minutes of having been killed. So even dead characters can survive with sufficient medical aid. But you suffer superficial wounds if no attributes reduced to 0, minor wounds if 1, serious wounds if 2, and death if all 3 are reduced to 0 out of your strength, endurance, and dexterity. And advancements handled on page 156 of the book. So if I flick forward, past some of this gorgeous artwork by Chris Foss. So it's 156. Skill improvement. Basically, if you succeed in a skill, use a skill successfully, have the player put a check mark next to that skill. Then at the end of the adventure, let the players know how many points the adventure was worth, based on its length and difficulty. And 1 session adventure might be worth only 1 point, while a major adventure that spans encounters on several worlds with many dangerous creatures might be worth as many as 4 or 5. Now, each of those you then spend in rolling against the skills that you've succeeded at. So, we go back to our sample character. He has used his computer skills successfully. So he decides to roll against that with his experience point, or 1 of his experience points. Now he's rolling a d6 against a target number of the skill level. And if he rolls over it, then the skill is advanced by 1. So we've rolled a 5, which is higher than 1. So his computer skill is now 2. If he rolled lower than that, so if he rolled a 1, then he would have failed to advance. He'd have spent the experience point, but his skills wouldn't have advanced. And it's simple as that. You check off the ones that you successfully use in adventure, and then you can spend your experience points in rolling against those to see if they advance. 1 character point per roll on each skill that you've used. Now, attributes are possible to increase, but they are all about the amount of time that you spend training. So your character needs to take months going to gyms and things to increase their strength, and that's all up to the games master, really. But that's how advancements counted. You get your experience points and you roll against the skills you've used to see whether they advance. So that is Marc Miller's Traveller 4th edition. It's a nice little system. It's very similar to MegaTraveller and Traveller the New Era. It's very simple. It's got some interesting ideas compared to a lot of other role-playing games. The target number thing is an interesting way of doing it, where you're rolling against the skill instead of adding your skill to a dice roll, like you would in more modern versions of Dungeons & Dragons, for example. Also, the experience system is really quite interesting because you need to use your skills successfully to be able to advance them. If you're not really doing anything, then you get very little choice in what you can improve. There's a real benefit in trying to do things in Traveller, because then you can advance later on. But I think I've whittled on for quite long enough, especially feeling as bad as I do. So I would like to thank you very, very much for watching. It's very much appreciated. But as always, most of all, you look after yourselves. And I'll catch you later. Bye now.